I was listening to the audiobook this morning as a little bit of a refresh. At the end, it had the quiz and what did we learn? And the take, I was like, felt like I was on the spot. I loved it. I was like, oh, I got this. I got this. I was like,
how'd you do on the quiz?
C's mean degrees.
Well, I've had the biggest spirited conversations with people who like to argue me on the answers on some of the quiz questions, but it sparks discussion, so it's not a bad thing.
No,
yeah, and I think it's one of those like self-selecting groups too. Like if you're thinking about it and you're putting some thought into your actions versus, I forget which one it was. Oh, it was the example you gave where you had the investor act like a jerk.
Act like a jerk at the table. Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
And I was like, oh, it was such good advice, because it doesn't matter who they are, if they're irregular, what they are, if they're abusive to your staff, just all the kind of the way you thought about it and broke it down with the 4 answers was genius, because those answers were the knee-jerk reactions a lot of the times.
I could tell you specifically the restaurant that exact thing happened. So, I mean, that's so much of it was literally things that had happened to me to where I was like, all right, so this one time when this investor came in and acted like a complete jerk to my staff, and my owner was on the phone going, he can't do anything about it. He's our chief investor. And it put me in such a spot of going, what do I do? And that's why I put that one in there, because sometimes you just have to go against, safety of what your owner is telling you to cover your staff and do it the right way.
No, I totally agree. And it's a moral crossroads.
Yes.
Because there's a right thing to do in that situation. And it may be financially harmful, but it's still the right thing to do. And if you always default to making the right decision and doing the morally correct thing, that's the most important.
And I will also say that the number of times that I've had to actually draw a line in the sand with ownership or somebody who's trying to manage my processes, and if that's that's the one that you're going to die on, go. That's because then you know that if you win that one, you establish what you're willing to take and what you're not.
Yeah.
And as much as we would like to pretend that people don't function like that, they do. They will take as much as that they feel that they can dish out to certain people. And so in doing that, if you're like, no, I'm going to protect the staff, I'm going to be this person, I'm going to be the gatekeeper there, then there's a better opportunity for the next time something happens like that the owner's going to go, oh yeah, Ken's going to do that and I really can't stop him.
Imagine a perfect world where you can build a restaurant, open the doors, and make loads of money. Unfortunately, those days are over. It takes great leadership, hard work, and long hours to operate a successful restaurant. Together, we can make it happen. This is Restauranttopia.
Ken, give me a little bit of your origin story. All the examples in the book I know come from real world stuff. When you're reading it, hear the heart and soul. It's not academic. It is real world practical advice that can be implemented today. But so tell me your origin story. Like, where'd you come up in the industry and how did you get to the point where I got to write all this down?
Hey, Brian, don't talk too loud because I'm in an academic institution right now, and I think these walls have ears.
I already vouched for you for tenure.
Oh, thanks, brother. Much appreciated. Yeah.
Started much in the way that most everyone has, is that it was high school. It was a job in high school. I was washing dishes. I was wearing a mascot outfit at a famed pizza place. And that was my initial first thing into it. And that's also the first time that I realized that it was important to be promoted, because they always asked the dishwasher to wear the mouse costume. They never asked the guy who was making the pizzas. So it was an immediate, I want to learn how to be a pizza guy because I don't have to wear the mouse outfit at the children's parties as much. And then my whole focus was going to be, I was going to be a writer. I was going to get my English degree. So I still was a bartender or server on the side, but it was always that side gig. And it's the thing that we always hear. It's that I'm going to do this until I get my quote real job.
Yeah.
Which is always so annoying to those of us who have actually chosen this as a career. And then I set out for a few years and did writing, wrote for magazines, wrote for newspapers, the whole time still picking up side jobs as concierge bartenders and things like that. Very quickly found I hated it. I hated sitting in an office. I hated being sedentary. I just really hated that aspect of it. And I was drawn more and more to it. Found myself in a situation to where I wanted to make a move. My buddy was in Chicago and he says, hey, I work at this bar. Why don't you come work at this bar? They stood me on the door as a bouncer at the bar, and I'm not a big guy. So I learned very quickly how to talk myself out of things because I get my ass kicked by most anybody. Like,
I
it's
thought
pretty.
you were going to say you learned Taekwondo real quick.
No. Taekwondo, that's even worse. You like stand and then you just get your ass kicked. It'd be even worse.
Ken, I feel for you. I have a very punchable face myself, and
it's just something about it. It's just something about it. It's terrible. So it moved from there, did back to a little serving there, and then went into management and never looked back. And that was how I got into a big city, into a big market, and then made the pivot from nightclub into restaurant. And as you probably can surmise, you don't learn a lot about hospitality in nightclubs. You learn how to tell people that they were wearing the wrong shoes or that they have to stand in line, but you're definitely not having some sort of generous positivity about their presence. It's, screw you. There's 100 of you behind you. Who cares? Yeah. So it took a fair amount of deprogramming to where I was like, all right, you know what? There is a value in hospitality. And then from there, that's where it kind of all took off.
The best part is the money doesn't come until you grow into the role of manager, right?
The money doesn't come till after you get out of management. I mean, that's the reality is that if it's all about money, you stay a server or a bartender. Mm-hmm. You have to kind of move beyond restaurant management into AGM, GM, whatever, before you're truly in a career position.
That's a very hard conversation to have. And me personally, when I would promote a line cook, the lead line cook, or some intermediary management position, the salary was always less than what they would make on an hourly with some overtime. Mm-hmm. And explaining that to employees and understanding the curve goes like this and then back up is so difficult. I wonder why we operate like that, quite frankly. I always felt my way discussing through that. And I'm like, wait, why don't we just change the dynamic here and just make it more money? You know, it's a crazy thing, but it's the way it goes.
Well, I mean, that's always the challenge when you put somebody in salary is that suddenly they're working more hours for less money. And it has to be about succession planning. It has to be that check-in of, hey, 60 days in, where are you at? Where are we going? How are we going to get you to the next position? Yeah. Because if you just tell them, that you're going to take this dip in order to build something greater as a career, and then you don't follow up and remind them that that's a real thing, that's when they burn out and leave.
Yeah. The thing is that happens all too often, right? We dangle the impossible proverbial carrot. Sure. We always do. And I grew up in the independent realm, and I love independent operations, always have, always will. And I worked in some corporate as well, but that carrot was more poison than it was helpful. And as Brian mentioned earlier, like the short game versus the long game, like certainly it pacifies everybody in the moment. But I often look at it and say, like, if you make these promises without that plan you're talking about in place, like you must hate yourself. Right. Because inevitably you're going to be putting out a bunch of fires and unmitigated disasters down the road because you made promises that you're not ready to deliver on.
That is absolutely the case. And I think that works with absolutely every position. If you're not looking at your top 10% for growth, and if you're not trying to build the core of your team on how to be in the top 10% and then trying to manage the bottom 10% to improve, and through succession planning, through this is your 30, 60, 90. This is where you're going to create and make yourself better or move to the next level, then everyone's going to devolve. I mean, you would devolve. At some point, if you didn't know that you had growth where you're at, you would go, okay, well, this is it. Because if this is it, I'm going to have to find my own path.
Yeah, and not only that, measurable objectives along the way, right? So I can put another notch in my belt every time I move, and there's something tangible and palpable there that I know I'm achieving and moving in the right direction.
Yep. That's why it's so annoying when I work with restaurateurs whose response is, I feel my staff could do more, or I think that their energy is low. And I'm like, these are not good statements. I think and I feel are marriage therapy statements. They're not statements to manage people. They're just not. So you can't, if Brian is a worse server than Anthony, then you have to explain to Brian the 3 measurables that are going to make him better. So it's going to be, you have to get a better check average. You have to get a better turn time. You have to get a better satisfaction rating on like Yelp. You have to figure out something that there's going to be a response to how to improve. Otherwise it's just, I feel that you could be happier. Oh shit. That's completely worthless.
You actually mentioned that when you were on with Josh Copel, right? So you talked about how to measure things for the sake of improvement, right?
Yes.
And I thought that was I think it was mowing the yard or something. I was listening to it, like, man, that was pretty profound. So my question, I guess, segues into what we wanted to talk about today, and that's how to effectively manage your staff through data versus emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you use those words like I think and I feel, and so often we predicate our next steps based on those feelings, those emotions. And you're telling me that's the wrong way to go, which I tend to agree with you. The problem is how do we apply that data to such a qualitative environment, right? Where the hospitality arena is filled with feels and things. But you're mentioning a couple of things that I think would help some operators out as far as measuring that. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I think that we're always going to follow gut. Gut has always led us to where we are. And so there's a fair amount of intuition of who we know who people are. And again, as intangible as it is, I often will think of management that I will go ahead and bring on as people that I possibly would be okay with having a beer with. Like, legitimately someone that I feel like I could keep a conversation up with, have a beer. They seem affable. They don't come off as massively introverted or jerkish. It's just that there's some level of that connection. And there's also the fact that different people work well with different managers. In one concept right now, I've got a manager who's working with a staff with a manager, and their response is, I'm having a challenge with working with that person. And my knowledge of that person is I can work really great with them, but this other manager couldn't because of how he manages. So it's all of that is gut level response. So on a level, yes, there is a fair amount of gut to it. But when you're talking about people's level of improvement, you can't manage people for an expectation or that succession planning by simply saying things like, you need to smile more, or you need to be, bring your A game, and all that stuff that we were all told by ineffectual managers in the industry growing up. For servers, there are measurables. There are check averages are a measure. If everybody else has a higher check average, then that means that you're not upselling. And yes, upselling is important, but it's not just a profit center. Part of upselling shows that you're excited about about the brand and that you're talking about it with passion. That's all a suggestion is ever supposed to be. It's not supposed to be, I'm going to go drop a seafood tower on that table so that I can get the maximum check. It's, I find this to be my favorite thing. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about that with passion. So if they're not doing that, then yeah.
It's funny you mentioned seafood tower, because we once a company I worked for, we had to let a server go because when they were doing parties, they would kind of just, when you run out of wine at a table and the server just assumes that you want another bottle of wine and they bring it. This gentleman did the same thing with seafood towers continually, and the party ended up with 4 or 5 of them, right? In an effort to raise check average is what it comes down to.
Right.
It didn't work out very well.
Okay, I've heard of people doing that with bottles of water. Like if you order Aquapana and then they just keep on bringing over new bottles, and then you get a check for $35 in water. I've had that happen, but I have never seen automatic refills of a seafood tower. That's pretty hilarious.
I think what it was, he sold the corporate credit card and thought that was carte blanche to do whatever he wanted to. And it unfortunately cost him a very good job, but I think he learned his lesson. Now thankfully he's doing very well in life and all's well and good. Yeah, I still know the guy, but that was the tactic. But you mentioned in the book again that how at the operator level or the management level, you can actually help servers increase check average. And it was through the perpetual menu tastings and rollouts during like queue times and family meals and stuff like that.
I'm often very surprised at the number of places that don't not only at the beginning engage the staff with being able to taste everything, but then continually bringing that into pre-shifts. And in some places, it's such an automatic that I forget that some places don't do it. But if you haven't tasted something on the menu in 6 months, you're likely not talking about it. And you're probably forgotten the ingredients, and you've definitely forgotten the adjectives of what it's going to be to describe it positively. So, and usually it's food costs. That's the biggest thing that you see people saying is that, I can't spend this money on this. I don't want to spend all this money to have the staff try everything. Fair. I get it if you don't, for every single server, you don't want to roll out 30 items. But then for the next 30 days, roll out 1 item a day in pre-shift so that they get the opportunity to stay engaged and to appreciate it and then to talk about it. And then most importantly, sell it back to chef. That's always been the biggest one. Is it's not just a tasting. It's an ability. Chef walks in, places the chicken piccata and goes, all right, sell it to me. Yeah. What's in it? And that is often usually, if you can't sell it, then it's like, Tommy, you're going to go home today because you obviously don't know your menu. So let's go back, and that's real. And that means that there's consequences for not being able to have the knowledge.
Well, and I've seen this too, where you don't have to give them a 3-course meal. You can take, 6 plates and split them up for 8 people, and everyone gets a taste, and they understand the flavor profiles. They understand what it would pair well with. And, you can give them, coach them up, and everyone gets a meal, but you're just not going to crush you on food costs where you don't have any waste.
Correct. Not only that, but I think it's got to be looked at as an investment. There's a return on that investment. The example you gave was a beer cheese soup sitting at the bar, right? And the bartender's response to you was so honest, even though they were a little bit vulgar about it. You couldn't help but order it because they were that jazzed about how good that food tasted, right? So there's a certain authenticity to the sales approach that differentiates between that and used car approach. Like my seafood tower example, probably used car approach, right?
Right.
The beer cheese, authentic, increased check average, but with delight, right? Because the customer's not mad that you upsold or not mad that they paid more because the experience was that good. But you as an operator or manager have to generate that type of excitement authentically at the ground level by something as simple as tasting.
Yep. And also not being that manager who pushes things in pre-shift. There's nothing worse than the person who says, go out and push the salmon because it's going bad. There's nothing worse than being in a place that gives you a robotic script. You're not supposed to be told what to fall in love with on the menu. You're supposed to be exposed to everything and talk about what you love with passion, because it's real, which follows into the 2-bite check, which we always have to do. But you're asking because if you truly think it's the best thing on the menu, then you're going to follow back up and say, am I right? Is it great? I love it. Do you love it? Talk to me about it. And to ask open-ended questions so you don't get a fine and good, and you get to actually engage with somebody to see, what are you enjoying this as much as I do? And that's real. And the move away from that is when you see things in pre-shift to where our special today, the thing that we're pushing today is going to be then everybody's saying the same robotic script. That's tough. There is a little asterisk on that for whenever you have competitions. Sometimes that there are certain items and certain meals and certain wines that you want to push, and it's like 3 to play. If you sell 3 bottles of wine, you get free dinner, if you get whatever. And those things, if you want to play that game and get in there, I don't have a problem necessarily with that, but that's not in replacement for a true, honest suggestion.
I think it goes to authenticity. You want to be authentic with the customer and give that guest experience. If you want to go to a local independent, an operator who cares about things and has a meal that they want to share with you, it's authentic. It's real. It's not scripted. And, to share that with the guest, that goes back to hospitality. I love that.
Yep. And then how you can translate that to data goes back to check averages. Mm-hmm. Because if you're not somebody who talks about things with passion, then there's a good possibility that you're also not the person who's talking about a passionate appetizer or a passionate dessert option or an after dinner drink. And so you can see your underperformers from the passion side by simply if they're 15% less than everybody else in a check average standpoint.
Ken, I love this. So let's give the audience, if I'm a manager right now and I go with my gut, I have a lot of feelings. I'm thinking really about hugs a lot, and I'm overwhelmed with emotion. What are my 3, 4, 5, whatever number you think it is, the KPIs that I can use to coach up and train my staff to bring them up to the next level?
I think for the first thing you have to do is remind yourself how you would react if your employer told you that you just needed to do better or, bring more energy, and to understand how vacuous and worthless that sort of feedback is, because it doesn't give any parameters. So it's that obvious reminder of, if you don't give somebody a map, then they're never going to figure out their way of getting better. Now, with that understanding, in order to motivate their staff, you look at the measurables. I've mentioned the check averages. Tip percentages is another huge one. And I think that's, I mean, if you're 15% less than everybody else from a tip standpoint, that is a telling statement that says that your level of service for however is not connecting with the guest. Not necessarily that you're giving bad service, because you don't want to put that on there. It's just obviously not connecting. It's not resonating with the guest in the way that everybody else is.
Yeah. What kind of time intervals do you measure that on? Is that a weekly thing or a bi-weekly thing? There's a lot of ebbs and flows, right? With generous versus non-generous and things. So you got to kind of zoom out to eliminate the outliers, right?
Correct. And you also have to do it daytime versus night, because people tip differently for lunch than they do for dinner.
Beautiful.
And you can look at it over time and see where people are falling. And if you're going to be the person to celebrate the top 3 in some sort of way, and you do that in a pre-shift, great. But I've definitely worked in places that found a value in putting that entire list out. And that kind of gets to a praise in public, punish in public sort of deal, which has a real divisive sort of response. Not a fan. So you can
not a fan of that either. Power ranking staff is not a teaching tool.
Not a teaching tool at all. So
I am a fan of it, but I'm not a fan of it as a professional.
Yes.
I mean, like the gladiator spirit behind it. I appreciate that. Like, every man for themselves. This is going to be awesome to watch. But from a management tool, no way, Jose. Rots my culture from the inside out.
Yeah. If shame is a motivator, that is not a good thing.
I just picture Anthony in the middle of the kitchen go, "You're not entertained? Are you not entertained?"
Full makeup. And all.
Yeah, exactly.
So being able to have that conversation with the bottom 3 to where you pull them over and you just be like, "Hey, I just want to let you know," and obviously want to mention this publicly, but you're last. You see that the top 3 are over 25% on their tip percentages, and you're at blank. And that's going to be a big determiner of showing, well, let's talk about how we get you there. Because that it's one thing to tell somebody that they're not doing well. Fine. So first off, you've become empathetic. You understand that if you were given the similar, emotional response, that you wouldn't respond well. Then you give them data that is based on turn times and check averages and tip percentages and all the things that are completely measurable. And then you talk to them about how to improve those things. How do you improve their check average? And if it is let's say, for example, if it's talking about the suggestion, then you say, "Hey, just sit down and talk to me." Not go do a mock service and pretend and I'll be here. So just sit across from me at the table and talk to me about what you love. What is it? Is it the chicken piccata? Do you love the chicken? No, you don't. So why do you talk about that? What do you love the most? Just talk about that with passion, and you guide them through the reconnection. And if you find out in the middle of that conversation that they don't have a connection to the menu, or they've lost that through line to something that they love, do some tasting, sit down, order some items, get them re-engaged on why it's important.
Yeah, I love that. How do you feel about taking the top 3 aside too? Do you do it with the same kind of zeal and vigor that you would with the bottom 3?
Yes. But then the top 3 are the ones that I began to think, how can I convince them to be managers? How can I convince them to make half as much money for twice as many hours? How's that going to work out? Which is always kind of my whole conversation with managers, because you see managers run around stressed and insane, which only tells your staff, I never want to be a manager. Mm-hmm. And especially with GMs, this is a big one, because GMs have this tendency sometimes of having the weight of the world on their shoulders and working the most brutal hours and just looking exhausted. And all I say is, you're really making it bad for anybody who's thinking about having a career in this industry, because you make it look like hell.
Yeah.
And so you have to have that sort of generous positivity to where you make the industry look a little bit more attractive from a management standpoint.
It'd be nice if they didn't have that big fat badge of honor on their chest too. Wow. Can you take the badge off and stop talking about it?
It's well earned though. So
it is. Don't get me wrong, it is. I did those long shifts. I was just in the back of the house mostly, and I didn't realize what I was doing by bragging about that. Like I should have been like, we have a guy that does these speeches for us, and every Friday he helps out with the staff, and he's always got some sort of positivity. He's just one of those guys that's like incredibly positive. And he talks about the importance of being a duck on the water, right?
Yep.
And that hit me with the manager. It's like on top, you're all calm and everything's serene and beautiful and cute, but on the bottom, your legs are moving like hell. It's just no one can see it, right? So you got to keep that part hidden, and then you got to be graceful on the top.
Yep. We talked about it. We call it Swan Theory. And it was that same sort of that you're supposed to be graceful on the floor, but then you can be in the back and you can be running around. I actually kind of moved away from that because then that allowed people to be the most garish versions of themselves behind the scenes. So they're running and pushing and shoving. And I'm like, guys, how is this okay? And they're like, well, you said it's okay for us to just be manic back here. And I'm like, okay, let's stop that, because we still have to work with each other and you're making it worse to be. So how about you sit in your car and go crazy? Just let's have a modicum of professionalism at all points.
We always use the walk-in.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Go scream in the walk-in. You'll be fine.
Maybe kick some boxes, something
That's
like
right.
that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Get it out of your system.
As long as they're 6 inches off the ground. That's all that matters.
Awesome. Ken, this is fantastic. I encourage everyone to go out and get the book. Where could they find it? I know where I bought it.
You can find it where all major books are sold online. And if you want the download version, it is only 99 cents on Amazon. So awesome. I would highly suggest, if you're interested in checking it out, that's probably a good way.
Yeah, this is pretty much free.
It's the Surprise Restaurant Manager. I can't get it in front of my camera here.
There you go.
We'll have the link in the show notes. Honest to God, folks, I read 3 to 4 books a month. This is the best one I've read in a long time. I put it right up there. Joe Polizzi's Content Inc. But these 2 books have been my favorite of 2021. Definitely get out there, get this book, consume it, and also give it to your managers. There are useful tips in here, and we're going to try to do another episode with Ken on another topic here. But I'll tell you what, this is a great book. Check it out. Highly recommended. If you don't like it, it's $1. Stop being so cheap. Go out and buy it just because I recommended it. Thank you so much.
Ryan said he'll reimburse you the $1. So.
I was going to go there. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. That's
I will. That's fine.
Yeah,
you can email me. I'll Venmo you $1.
There you go. No one's not going to like it though, because it's so authentic. It's so nice to read because it's not full of itself. It doesn't insist upon itself. It's got the right amount of humor, the great amount of testimony, and then again those takeaways at the end. Like I look forward to reading it, and you can plow through it and feel accomplished and gain knowledge all at the same time. It's a wonderful thing.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks so much.
This is a high quality pod. Thank you, everybody.
Take care. Adios.
Thank you for listening to Restaurantopia. The gratitude that we have for each and every one of you spending your precious time to listen to this podcast is immeasurable. Please make sure to tell a friend about this podcast. And also, if you have any feedback for us, visit us on restaurantopia.com and drop us a line. You can also subscribe on your favorite place to listen to podcasts. Thank you and have a great day.
We are excited to announce the Restaurantopia VIP Text Club. Join by texting the word podcast to 844-928-4257. You will get access to exclusive content, industry news, deals, announcements, pro tips, and more. The VIP Text Club is an exclusive community of independent restaurant owners and professionals. Join today. Message and data rates may apply. Please check our website for our terms of service and privacy policy.
We also want to thank our sponsor, Hillcrest Food Service. If you are a local independent restaurant and are looking for a distributor who has chef and operational consulting, provides marketing support, does menu reviews, and most importantly, wants you to be successful, reach out to Hillcrest Food Service at hillcrestfoods.com.